So if we look at an optimal sized bee colony, there might be about 50,000 bees in a colony, in a hive. About 90% of those, or 45,000-ish, give or take a few depending on the time of year, are these worker bees. There is one queen and the rest are drones, and they're the boys. So if the girls are doing all this work, what are the boys doing? Well, nothing much. They sit around being waited upon, being fed honey. They don't even bother stinging people, but they do go out. They go out to the drone congregation area, which is about 30 meters above ground. And these guys go up there in the hope of meeting a queen. And the lucky ones get to mate with the queen. Although that's not so lucky because they die immediately, and that's the end of that. So that's the job of the drones. Actually, they're a bit more important than that. They get a bit of a bad rap. And I mean, they're responsible for the genetic diversity of bees. So it's a pretty important job and someone's got to do it. So what about the queen? Well, when she is born, she spends a few days just orientating herself with her new family, with the colony of bees. And she goes up to the drone congregation area, chaperoned by a whole bunch of worker bees. This is a really treacherous trip for her. She needs to get there and back again in one piece. And so she is escorted by a number of worker bees. And they take her up to the drone congregation area, and they even manage the drones. They sort out which drones are going to mate with the queen. And they do this in this drone congregation area. She mates with about 6 drones, and then returns to the hive. And she proceeds to lay eggs pretty much every day for the rest of her life, which is about 4 to 6 years. And she can lay up to 2,000 eggs in one day, which is greater than her own body weight in eggs. Pretty amazing, eh? Excuse me. So the laying of the eggs is quite an incredible thing too, because she's returned from this drone congregation area with enough sperm to last for those 4 to 6 years, her whole lifetime. And she's got to produce drones and workers, boys and girls. And every time she lays an egg, each one of those 2,000 eggs that she might lay in one day, she makes a choice. Is this a worker or is this a drone? If it's going to be a worker, she adds some sperm, fertilizes it, lays that egg. If it's going to be a drone, she doesn't fertilize it, becomes a drone. Amazing, eh? So that's a bit of a snapshot of how the colony works. But there's actually a second level of reproduction that goes on. And the more time I spend with bees, the more I see a colony of bees as an entity in its own right. It is a superorganism. It has a single mind, and every bee within that colony operates in the best interests of that colony of bees. And that's where the second level of reproduction happens too. That superorganism reproduces itself. So as well as the queen, bee, 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 egg, 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 bee, 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 producing all those eggs every day, once a year, sometimes maybe more, the colony gives birth, effectively, by swarming. So what happens with swarming is that when they're feeling good, a bit like a mammal almost, when conditions are good and there's lots of forage and the hive is really pumping, and they say, right, okay, it's time to breed, give birth. So as a single entity, they get themselves together and decide to produce some supersedure queens, because the existing queen is going to leave. So she lays half a dozen worker eggs, which get copious amounts of royal jelly in order to make queens out of them. They're just worker eggs, but because they get extra royal jelly, they become queens. So this process starts, and just prior to the hatching of these new queens, the decision is made to leave. So all the workers gorge themselves with honey. They've got 3 days in which to give birth. They gorge themselves with honey, and the decision's made, it's time to go. And they leave as one, leaving a hive half full of bees and some queens that are just about to maintain the existing colony. So this swarm heads up into a tree not far from the hive, and for the next 3 days they've got to choose somewhere to live. So what they do is they hang in a beautiful ball, hanging hopefully in a tree, and sometimes in very inconvenient places, but hopefully in a tree. And they send out scouts. These workers head off into the environment and go looking for real estate. They basically just check out the possible living places and come back and report on what they find. And they evaluate it. This swarm sitting in this tree evaluates what news the workers are bringing back as to what's the most suitable place to live. And within 2 or 3 days, they've made a decision. They've decided on the best place, and as one, they leave and they go directly to this place, straight into it. The workers start building comb, wax comb as fast as they can, and the queen starts laying eggs in it. And that's reproduction of a bee colony, the superorganism. So that's sort of how bees work. That's only touching the surface really, but there is so much more to know. But that gives you a bit of an idea about how things work.